So I'm Alison Newman. I am at UW ADAI. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm going to briefly just go over a handout that we mentioned in the last session. We created this handout, Meth Overdose, Know When to Get Help, as well as a longer form one to help people understand when they need to get medical help for related to methamphetamine and what that looks like. What we found is that many people did not perceive that you could overdose from meth and that it was really important for people to know the signs and symptoms. So this is something we developed in partnership with talking to people who use meth, healthcare providers, treatment providers, and this is available in English and Spanish. We also have a longer form one that talks about how to address people who are having mental health issues related to methamphetamine. So this is available for download or print. And Erin, who's been running our slides, as the one who did the graphics on it to make it look really so lovely. So want to shout out to Erin also for doing our slides today, which I think are fantastic looking. So yeah, we also have more information about meth overdose on the page that's associated with it. So definitely check that out. And it's something you can print or request from us to hand out to people. So I think we can get started with our next panel. It's No Single Path, Personal Stories on Meth Use, Harm Reduction, and Recovery. I'm really excited to be here with my two panelists, August Oliver and Jeremy Russell, who I've really enjoyed getting to know over Zoom and email. I am a little jealous that they each have an animal with them today. And all I have is my hummingbirds out the window, but unfortunately they are not coming in. So we don't have any slides, so we're just going to kick it off with some questions. Thank you both so much for being here today. Could you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little about yourself? August, maybe because you're already on mute. Do you want to start?
I'm August, and this is Pika. I work at Catholic Community Services. I don't know.
That's great. Oh, Pika.
If she were like put away, she'd be screaming right now. So
Oh, you're fine.
I told her.
Jeremy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Similar. If my dog was put away, she'd be screaming right now. I'm Jeremy. I'm a queer male, lives in Seattle. I do work in like legal diversion, but a lot of my other time is spent active in recovery from crystal meth. I'm a facilitator for a meeting called Strength Over Speed that was founded as part of a public health initiative back in the late 90s during the men's AIDS health crisis. I used meth for about 15 years, some chunks of it on the whole time, and then sometimes it was sporadically, but definitely spent some time doing it.
So that sort of goes in, oh, go ahead.
And that was Lily, but she's laying
down. I have a Zoom rule I created, which is if you have an animal with you, you have to show it on camera at some point. But I think let's see this animal. Very nice. My next question is, and either of you can go first, could you talk a little about why you started to use meth and also why you continued?
I can start. I thought a lot about this question because it's kind of a mind bender for me, and now that I'm in recovery and I've really looked at that. But originally, like the short story for it was that I was in my early 20s in the early 2000s, and there wasn't a lot of information about it. I knew drugs were bad, but I'd already experimented. And then a friend of mine who he said, "Oh my God, come down to my office and try this." I tried it. I didn't eat for 3 days. I was a chunky kid, and I also was awake for 3 days. But I felt like Superman, and then I didn't, I just dove in, and I was hooked. But I can echo a few of the things that Brian said. I kept using it because of that weird in between the two stressful places. But in addition to that, and I only found this out in recovery, what really kept me using it was that there was just all this shit going on. I didn't really know it before I found the drug, that I had all this trauma and childhood shit. And it formed this narrative that I could believe about myself, that, you know, as long as I do this, this, and this, I would be enough. I found the meth and all of that work stopped. I was like, all of a sudden, all of the answers were answered, and I didn't really know that it was a drug. And so, like, stopping it meant I had to go back into that. Starting the meth made me know that I was just making up this narrative, but there's nothing I could do about that narrative once I stopped the meth. So it just kept becoming this cycle over and over again. And that's why I kept using.
Thanks for sharing that. August, can you want to talk a little bit about why you started using meth and what made you continue?
So I started because, like, so basically my dad was living in this stupid red van, and I was walking by the van one day. He like opened the door and he's like, "Get in here, get in here." So I got in the van and he had like lines of cocaine laid out. And like I didn't know him very well, so I was kind of trying to like impress him a little bit. So I did some of the lines, and I was hooked on cocaine, but cocaine is very hard to find and it's very expensive. So meth was just the cheaper alternative.
And how old were you then?
18. Yeah.
And so what made you continue using meth?
Boredom, I guess. And I was homeless, so yeah.
What about being homeless made it so that you continued to use?
I mean, if you're homeless, at least me being homeless, it was around me constantly. Um, like the people I was around, it just kind of was like a self-perpetuating cycle. Um, like the moment that I got into a shelter, I just stopped using instantly. Like, I didn't need any like rehab or anything like that. So obviously it was the homelessness that was causing it. Um, but I think that I don't know. I don't know. I just it was something about being on the streets. It just was not like there were times that I was like, I'm gonna stop doing drugs today. And like 20 minutes later I'd be smoking a bunch of meth. So yeah.
How
So
many
it sounds,
times did we do that in August?
I know, right?
So many times. That's it. I'm done with this.
Right? Yeah. It doesn't happen. Yeah.
so you're saying that you feel like being homeless really contributed to you continuing to use it because of the environment. And were there any stressors that made it so that 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 meth sort of helped address for you? I heard Jeremy say that, the unpacking trauma and then using meth just made that not feel like a priority.
I mean, I while I was homeless, I was a bit of a target for things like
Mm,
sexual violence. As a woman, that's just gonna happen. Um,
mm,
but towards the end of my homelessness, I started dealing meth, which made me a target for like robbery. Um, but I mean, in general, like I think it was mostly just boredom. Like I was just, I don't know. I mean, there's probably like trauma there too that I just wasn't dealing with, obviously. Um, but I mean, I was even going to counseling while I was homeless. Um, I don't know. Like I have epilepsy. Um, so there was like a lot of medical things going on. Um, I don't know. Like I was in the hospital like once every 2 weeks at least. which I did not appreciate it when people called like an ambulance for me, because then I just wake up in a completely different place and I'd have to find a way back, and it was a whole thing. Really did not appreciate that. Um, so I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like there are a lot of layers to it, but that
Yeah.
housing was really helpful.
Yeah.
Jeremy, is there something you want to add?
Yeah, I liked what August said there, the undealt with trauma. Like, I think we can all identify with that, so, and not all of us end up on meth. But it kind of, the using the meth, what happens is, I don't know, like when I stopped, all of that, that's what would come back into my head was the stuff that I hadn't been dealing with. And of course, I'd been high for a year or so, so nothing was being dealt with, it was building up. But in what August said, that the things that happened to me while I was using, because the nature of the drug and the community it forms outside, and then in the various queer spaces that I've occupied while using the drug, that's even more. And it's like, it's wild because it's reinforcing itself by like, you don't want to deal with this, so keep on going. And meanwhile, it puts me in the path of that kind of stuff that would result in something I wouldn't want to deal with. So it is an interesting trap. Yeah, that's all.
I think that's a really good insight that for you, using caused more things you didn't want to deal with that then caused you to use more to not deal with it. So I really appreciate you both being um, so honest and sharing with your responses. Um, August, I want to sort of follow up on one question. When you did end up in the hospital, was it related to your meth use or your epilepsy or other kinds of things?
It was well, it was either that I had a seizure or I dislocated my shoulder. The seizures were really damaging my shoulders.
Mm,
And so one day I woke up in an alley and my shoulder was dislocated. And so the first time it happened, I was able to get it back in, but then eventually it started happening every time I had a seizure.
oof.
And then it just started happening on its own. Um, and so I'd have to go to the hospital and they'd have to reset it. And eventually it got to the point that they would have to sedate me every time to reset it. Um,
Mm,
and it was like happening more often than I was having seizures. Like now I've had 2 reconstructive surgeries to fix it. And my other shoulder is dislocating too now. It's a whole thing.
mm,
But like I've had a piece of my shoulder blade grafted into my shoulder, and then that
mm.
failed, and then they had to use a piece of my pelvis to put that into my shoulder socket.
Wow. So aside from meth use, you had other really challenging health issues. When you did go in, did providers ask about your drug use or
Oh yeah. I mean,
yeah,
they
what was that
knew
like?
very well about my drug use, and at first they were kind of weird about it, but especially at the UW Medical Center, which is a crappy hospital, I will say, but I had never lied about my drug use. So they kind of figured out that I wasn't there for pain medication. Because
Hmm.
like I had never tested positive for opiates, so they kind of knew that I wasn't there to get opiates. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, and Jeremy, were there times that you tried to seek any kind of health care and what was that like?
Oh yeah. Yeah, in the MSM community, men who have sex with men, like a couple of times I would use a substance called GHB with my meth. And there were just occasions where I'd pass out on the sidewalk. Or
Mm.
on another occasion, a friend came over and I wasn't really functioning well. He didn't need to call the hospital. I was really mad about that August. Like I was like, what are you doing? Because I didn't, but in any case, anybody would have called the hospital because the first time I was passed off the ground and I couldn't speak, right? And going there is, I've always went to Harborview. They're my favorite because as a longtime drug user, because I've been through the hospital for other times. So these are the first 2 times where I was like first time I lied and said, oh, I think someone drugged me. And then 2 days later when I came back, they were like, what's going on? And I was like, I did GHB. And I did the last time, and they were like, we know. So like the Harborview emergency room is phenomenal. There are other hospitals, and I mean phenomenal in the way that they just don't give you any bull. It's really like they talk to you straight. It doesn't feel like a welcome mat or a welcoming committee, but they treat drug users as drug users. It's from my experience. And the social workers there know how to speak to people a little bit more than I'd say Swedish or UW Medical Center seems to. That's one of our, like in the meth using world or the drug using world, everyone knows not to go there, whether it's to find drugs or just to be treated like a human. But it really depended on the provider. What I noticed is that anybody that had anybody in their lives that had experience with this treated me differently. I could always spot, it's generally the doctors or some of the nurses, maybe nurses that had more experience for a longer time, and this new wave came in, I guess, but they treated me differently, and that's kind of all I really wanted. The doctors who didn't know experience, it always felt like someone just Googled it and read the worst case scenarios, and then they were responding to me in that manner. And I've been for psychosis related to my meth use, and that's hard too, just because I really don't know what would have been the right way to handle me. The only person that handled me correctly in psychosis, and this is totally probably, it's great. I went in psychosis in San Diego right after my very first episode during it, and I was so out of my mind. I thought I was controlling things with my mind and reading people's thoughts, all the good stuff. And everyone was just trying to just really manhandle me and get me to calm down, and telling someone whose blood pressure was through the roof, calm down. And I think they're sent there by someone who paid them to be there for me. So I'm going out of my mind. So as I'm just pacing in the room, this one nurse came in and he looked at me. He's like, don't tell anybody I gave you this. And he handed me 2 little pills. He's like, take these, and I promise you're gonna feel better. And he was homosexual, I could tell, because he was, and I took them. They were Valium. They were on my chart. But that person knew what he was doing, because he played into it without making it seem like, without escalating it, just to get me to move towards some sort of like better outcome. And that's when I started to come down out of my psychosis that next day, because I got my chart. I was like, I was like, it's real. So yeah, medical, it's always a hit or a miss. Like, honestly, if they're stressed, there's been a lot of drug users. When I've gone to the emergency room post-using, and I see a lot of drug users in the waiting room, I know that the medical staff isn't going to necessarily be the most patient with everyone in there. And I think that it would be natural for them to, if I'm a drug user, I'm losing it, or something's wrong with me and I'm freezing in Seattle, and where else would I go, right? Like, like, and so it's like this weird system issue. And so like, I get where they're coming from. I don't know how to, like, just being treated like a human, and some exposure, honestly, to these kinds of conversations. If providers would spend some time getting to know some meth users, either actively using who aren't, in crisis, or getting to know, coming to groups like we hold here and other groups, or we hold at SOS or Pure Seattle, they'd really be able to understand, like, this isn't someone that's just partying until they get sick and coming in to have you take the pain away.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing those experiences and the variation in how you were treated in different settings. And carrying that is really valuable, and that it can vary even at the same program just based on burnout or fatigue or what was going on with people that day. Jeremy, could you just say a little bit about why having a gay provider in that situation was helpful for you?
I think that, I mean, they can't really tell us, but I think that somewhere in the range of 10 to 30% of men who have sex with men, or 10 to 30% of people who use meth or could be, or diagnosed with disorder, use at the level of disorder, are men who have sex with men. And there's something like 10+% of men who have sex with men have used meth in the past recent, like based on some studies. And like, I think it's just more about that he knew somebody or has used meth and had been through it. Like, honestly, I think that was it. Most gays haven't, especially nowadays, because it's after COVID, my group expanded because so many people that used to be treat me like a tweaker, are now, they started using meth during COVID and they're now coming to support. So I just think that the prevalence of meth use amongst this community, as well as amongst I mean, everyone has at least someone in their first degree that they know who's used meth in a big city, like, and they're gay or queer at all. So therefore, I just think he knew, and like, I hope that he went back to the rest of his staff who was treating me like I was gonna burn the place down, and said, you know, he's just high on meth. Here's what we do. Like, I hope that those kinds of conversations are happening. I don't know that the resources or time is even made available for people to kind of like learn these kinds of tactics, because it felt special. I believed that he was an actor or a government agent in my psychosis. So like, the fact that he was, the gayness is what made that possible for me. Like, oh, he, you know, the trust was there, and he knew how to convince me that he was really part of the show, just enough to give me these secret pills as if he was sent there for me. And in my mind later on, I was like, oh, I wonder what that was, because he obviously was there. He gave me the pills and I felt better. But you know, he just knew what to do.
So it's seeming like having some familiarity with why people might use and good ways to respond was really valuable. So I have a semi-related question. You've talked about healthcare. Did either of you use harm reduction programs like syringe services programs or safer smoking? I see August. And then what was that like?
I used to use a needle exchange. I also like kind of lived outside the needle exchange. Like I slept in front of their doors a lot. I also like volunteer for Never Use Alone now. But the needle exchange was rad. I really like them. They gave out like I didn't use needles mainly because I have really bad veins. And I was really scared that if I shot up meth, that I would have a seizure. I was like almost 100% sure that was what would happen. But they gave out like meth pipes and stuff like that, so that's what I used them for.
What was rad about the exchange?
For one, the staff was pretty cool. Like at one point, it's a long story, but I stabbed myself in the leg with a knife. It's pretty. Johnny Oda is here. Oh my gosh. Hi, Johnny. Anyways, um, Johnny Ota is one of the people that helped me get sober back in the day. Anyways, distraction. Um, there was a nurse that was working for the needle exchange, and they helped me like clean and treat my wound every day. Like, because I was sitting in the dirt outside of the needle exchange, and they would come out. And then she was like this really nice old lady, and she'd be like, "Can I come and see you?" Like she was like, she didn't want to scare me, but she would be like, "Is it okay if I come and talk to you? Like, is that all right with you?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." Like, she was just the sweetest old lady. And she would come and like change the gauze and everything to make sure it didn't get infected because it's like a 4 inch deep stab wound. Um, yeah, she was a really cool person, and she kind of like exemplified everything that the needle exchange is about.
Thanks for sharing that, and really glad you were able to get care for your wound. I imagine being outside, living outside especially, makes it really hard to keep a wound clean and dressed.
Yeah.
Jeremy, did you use any kind of harm reduction services like syringe exchange or safer smoking supplies or?
But by the time that I knew that it existed, I had progressed to injection use and had no shame about going and getting pipes at stores, but the needles were like, it changed the course of the way that I used having the needle exchange. I had a lot of pride around the idea that there was one, and so I was like a little afraid of it, because I didn't really know I didn't know it, and I was scared of it, and it was other people knowing that I was using meth by IV use, which I had a lot of shame that I carried with it. But because I was unaware of it and prideful up after that, I did things like trade sexual favors for needles that were clean, go to stores and get, turned away multiple times. That was really frustrating. I was like, I don't know why they won't sell them to folks who want to pay for them versus, because like I wanted to yell at the pharmacist, you won't believe what I've done to get high with a needle because I can't get them anywhere. Like reusing needles, and I damaged my veins pretty badly there. Generally my own, but not always. Once I was high, it was like, who could really keep track of which ones was whose if I was partying with people. So I went, as soon as I got the break, someone came over, another drug user, let me know about the needle exchange, and they're like, it's really not as scary as you think it is, and, but it's right downtown near where I live. So I dressed up as if I was going to the work. I hadn't had a job for a couple of years. Like, I dressed up really nice, and I put my backpack on, and I just walked down 4th Avenue and was like, I'm going to work. And then I just darted in the door. It was very prideful and embarrassing the way that I was acting. Right now I'm not exactly pleased with it. And I went in there, and it was such a beautiful experience because I didn't have any to exchange. And they were like, well, that's not how this works. But they gave me a free pack and talked to me about my use in a way that it sounded like I was actually speaking to someone who is a medical professional that may or may not use meth. They just seemed so familiar with all of it. And there was no shame or judgment in anything they did. It was care, any type of times where I'd go in there, they were, hey, Jeremy, you were here a couple of days ago. You already threw that last 100 that you already got. And but it always came from a place of girl, you better slow down, that kind of energy, not necessarily and also checking on me and reminding me to hydrate. These kinds of things are important. Handing me water when they had it, these kinds of things are important. Talking to me about why I shouldn't use other waters to inject. They're just so capable in there. It's so frustrating that hasn't been made available since time immemorial for anybody using IV drugs. But yeah, and I send people that I know that use who are struggling with that, definitely down there to the needle exchange, because it's just saving lives. I probably shared needles with people who were infected with HIV and not med compliant, and wasn't aware of it. And this is definitely why we see a lot of I think, HIV cases kind of going up, is people are not accessing or don't have access to these types of services. And it's it made me make choices that were putting my health at risk over and over again. And as soon as the needle exchange was part of my life, a marked reduction in harm and risk. And all I had to do was go and see these people I liked.
Hear you both say that the sort of knowledge and attitudes of the staff were different than you had experienced in other places. Some places you had good experiences, but generally really positive with the syringe exchange.
Yeah. No one ever told me at the ER, which is wild to me, because I had gotten staff and was clearly a drug user, and no one ever mentioned not even the social workers who did do good by me, who kind of nudged me in the right direction each time I went. None of them talked to me about safer use. It was always none of them really even talked about my use. They wanted to know if I was using drugs, and they would write it in their chart. And then whatever happened after that, I wasn't informed of how that was informing it. They weren't really super interested in it. The social workers definitely wanted to know if I wanted to go into inpatient treatment and do a SUD assessment, which is totally a traumatic thing anyway. But yeah, no one was really actually concerned with how I was going to continue using it in a safer manner or what I could do to reduce the harm. Not until the needle exchange. And my community, the meth, I would say that the gay men's meth community, for the most part, it is very much harm reduction as you can get, being in active addiction to meth. Most of the time, my advice was from people who use meth who saw me doing what I was doing and said, "Girl, you need to drink some water. You need to stop." Some of them would stop, and we would eat, like that kind of stuff. That was in community. To have it show up in a medical environment was like life changing, because I was like, maybe there's hope.
So what motivated you to stop using meth? I think August, you said as soon as you got housing, you just stopped. Could you talk a little bit about you getting housing and how that contributed to you stopping?
Well, like Johnny, who's here apparently, which I didn't know was coming, was cool. Him and his coworker Abby. Well, it was just Abby, but he was working with she was working with Johnny. She walked up to me and I was lying in a pile of trash by the needle exchange, in the U district, and she was like, "Do you want some housing?" Well, I was sleeping and it was a whole thing, but she asked me if I wanted some housing, and I was like, "Sure." And so she started meeting with me every few weeks. Um, and eventually she got me into the shelter La Batea. Um, and once I was in the shelter, I was like, well, it would be disrespectful to the shelter to use in the shelter. But I knew that if I left the shelter, I wouldn't come back, which would be disrespectful to Abby. So I had literally like $200 worth of meth in my backpack, like under my bed. Like I literally would like hang over my bed and like stare at it. And I eventually called my friend and I was like, "Come and get this from me. I don't want to do it. Like, just take it. You can just have it." So I just gave my friend like a lot of drugs and was like, "Just take it." And like, 'cause originally I wasn't even planning on getting sober. That wasn't the goal or anything. But then I met Abby and I was like, "So I haven't done any drugs in like 8 days." And she's like, "Are you kidding me? Why didn't you tell me?" Like, and she wasn't like mad, but kind of frustrated because I didn't tell her. She was like, "You could make this official. Like, you could keep this going." Um, but yeah, so it just kind of turned into a thing, but just kept going. Um, but it definitely wasn't the original plan. Um, and then she convinced me to get on like anti-seizure meds. Um, yeah, but Abby and Johnny are literally I don't think I'd be alive if it weren't for Abby and Johnny. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm glad that Johnny's here.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about what motivated you to stop and what that was like for you?
Just motivate. I'm just thinking of it in the context. I frankly, on the other end of that spectrum, I had exhausted all of my resources. I was divorced. I used the money that I made from the house that I sold from that divorce. Got high. Like I was spinning towards the bottom, and I was about to be evicted, and suicidal because I no longer could afford rent or meth. And I decided that like it was really, I was like, I'm not going to kill myself before I go to rehab once. Out of all these like 15, 16 years of use, I should try rehab once. And just because I hadn't, I didn't want to kill my mom's still alive. And that's really what made me, I was like, I'm not going to kill myself before I do this thing. I got a few, like 14 days in, and I started to kind of like realize that, because I hadn't gotten 14 days from meth in 5 years. I hadn't gotten 7 days from meth in 5 years. 3 days after stopping, oh my God, I can't take it. And like I started to think about all the stuff that I had done. Right, the year that led up to that started off with my father dying, and I didn't react well. He had insulin syringes, and when my family left, I decided that I can't take this. I'm going to take his syringes and go get high for a year. And that started to settle in, and just being in that space and not having to do anything or think about anything else and working on myself, I finally was able to connect that I was creating the pain that I was running from while I was trying to cure it, and that had to change. So the rehab experience was great. I moved into a sober living environment. If I had not done that, I would have relapsed because but I wasn't going to be homeless. Like I had been housing unstable, and it scared me so much. I never had been forced to sleep outside. And I was terrified of it. And so I stayed sober in unsober living. I moved out. My community had kind of dissolved during that time from the damage, and just I now was a sober person, and my partying friends were not around. And I discovered the group that I'm a part of now, that I've been a part of for 6 years, maybe even 7, Strength Over Speed, which is it's a group of people, men who have sex with men, or male identified individuals who have sex with men, recovering from crystal meth, and they are my community now. It's well, a lot of them make up my closest circle of friends, but through them and the work we do in there, like that's what keeps me sober. Like it is the connection to that group and that community, and that's what's, I think, ultimately the meth makes an analog for that feeling. I realized this as I went along, like, oh, I feel like I'm in community when I'm high on meth and I'm with a bunch of gay guys and we're doing what they do, then they use, and it's like, yeah, I'm popular and all that feeling. It feels like that. It's not that, obviously. I have that now, and I'm not going to lose it. So that's what keeps me sober.
So I'm hearing you
And
say
I'm
that
old.
community was really important, and you're old.
And I don't want a heart attack. And my dad.
We're like almost the same age, Jeremy. You're not old.
But you didn't use meth for 15 years. Who knows how big this thing is?
One thing that you shared when we met on Zoom is that you felt like it was really important that you find a group that did involve queer people, that some of the other traditional SUD treatment spaces weren't as appropriate for you. Could you speak on that a little bit? Yes.
The gay male experience, or the men people that kind of identify as that when they're using meth, it's the experiences we have are so different from, I think, people who don't participate in that community, that it feel when I was listening to Brian speak, it was interesting because I'm like, I don't know Brian's story, but I could tell the perspective was so different than mine. Similar vibes, different mechanics, right? Mm-hmm. And those mechanics are things that, as a queer male, like enticed me. And for me, and meth is a siren. My mentor says that all the time. And it entices me, and those things can't just be left in the shadows. We have to bring them out and discuss them. And I wouldn't be able to go to a regular straight meeting and be like, so I'm not going to say it on this webinar, but like the things I might say it's a lot. We've had people come into our meetings who have been professionals every once in a while, and it's like, they don't normally hear that stuff. It's because that's what's happening. So it's very important, and it's particular. And I think that it's probably valid for queer females too. Their experiences on meth, like, I don't know that there's a huge proportion, but like, I don't know that, and I don't really know because I've never actually met a female that is a lesbian or a gay female that uses meth and had a lot of time with them to discuss that. But I imagine that what locked them in is different than what locked a gay man in versus what locked like a heterosexual male or female in. Like the CPS thing, like it's never going to be my stressor. But I can see why it would be. That would totally stress me out. So, and it's just, we speak the same language, and I don't know that anybody else wants to speak it with us.
Yeah, I think thanks so much for sharing that and how unique and different people's experiences are and how important that is to get supports that are appropriate.
I
Um,
do want to plug that Mike Barry did some research from the School of Epidemiology with our group. So if anybody wants a perspective on that, it's men who have sex with men and methamphetamines. He did a lot of research, and the gay male experience is for sure, or the queer person's experience is very much reflected in the research.
And we actually did a webinar with Mike Barry and one of our upcoming panelists, Peter Cleary, who talked about that research, and I'll find the link and put it in the chat. I'm going to move into the Q&A because I did not manage my time as well as I should have because you both spoke so eloquently that I just wanted to keep asking my own questions. But we have a question from Jackie Snell. What kind of support would you have wanted from your community/random people? And what would you want them to understand about your use?
Um, I didn't really use many supports other than the needle exchange. I didn't really go to like any of the like feeds or anything like that. Um, so I don't really know what supports I would have wanted. I know the people around me used this one that was out of the Quaker church, and I think they would have liked that to be more extensive. And that was where they just handed out like different, like they handed out like blankets, and like toothbrushes and different items like that. And they ran out of stuff really fast. Um, and there also like there was a lot of issues where like the services were mainly geared towards youth. Almost all of the
Hmm.
services are geared towards youth. And I think that that's one of the issues that a lot of people, especially in Seattle, run into. And I'm just
Hmm.
speaking of this from someone who was homeless for 7 years. I don't know about services that are not for people from like that are not homeless. But that is a huge issue that homeless people run into. Is that pretty much every service that is not going to be like kind of not crappy. I'm trying not to swear. Um, is it's geared towards the youth. Um,
Hmm.
like unless you want to be staying in a shelter that makes you pray to like stay there, it's for like youth, like 18 to 25.
Hmm.
Um,
So sort of a lack of services for more different types of people.
yeah. It's either women or youth, and even the women's shelters are kind of crappy.
And then what do you wish people, sort of other people would understand about your meth use?
Um, I answered this to you, but I think I've
Yeah.
changed my answer. I think that there's like this whole portrayal of homelessness that's almost like poverty porn.
Hmm.
That like, oh my gosh, they're barely surviving. Oh my God, what do we do? And like, honestly, I had a lot of fun times when I was homeless. Like we were laughing and we were having a lot of fun. And like the media doesn't portray that. They just portray like
Hmm.
a black and white photo of someone shivering under a blanket. I'm like, oh my gosh, donate to the Union Gospel Mission. And like, it's a very like, obviously you're gonna have some cold nights, but like, it's there's some more. It's a varied experience, you know what I mean? And like, sometimes it's also like very dangerous or sad or whatever. Like, I mean, I don't know. I've seen people get like the poop kicked out of them or whatever, but there's also sometimes where like you're with your friends and you're having a really good time. You know, like you build a family out there. Like I think one of the hardest times of me being homeless was leaving my family.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, like I still see people out there and some of them are mad that I left.
Yeah, so that
And
connection, it can be challenging when you move into a different situation too. I'm hearing Jeremy say the connection, leaving, becoming sober was challenging for that loss of connection, and for you,
Yeah, like I
housing
think that was
also.
the hardest part of me getting sober was like, oh, these people are really, like I didn't really struggle with the sobriety aspect, which I think is really different. Like I thought that was kind of
Hmm.
rude, like not really having cravings, but I
Hmm.
miss the people.
And Jeremy, what kind of support would you have wanted from your community, and what would you want people to understand about your use?
Um, for me, I think that because I think that what I would have liked is better understanding when I was at the age where I was actually starting to consider drugs. Like it was all fear-based or really related to drinking. I did not know what meth was when I did it, and I didn't know what it was for 3 months after I did it. I purposely avoided looking into it. But like I didn't have an idea, and there was no understanding. Like I did not know what I was getting into. So having some understanding before I made that choice about what really would be the impact or could be the impact, or hearing from people that use at an earlier age, like in high school, would have been phenomenal. And I'm not talking about the guy who comes on stage, but you know, a little bit more focused and interactive. Um, as far as my community or even the random in community, I think that accessing healthcare, especially for treatment, um, it was so difficult. I had to drag myself through a Medicaid approval process to get into a
Mm.
rehab that I didn't really want to go to. I was doing stimulants, just
Mm.
like I was just like, it was this horrifying process. Um, so like that, lowering that barrier would have been awesome, because I don't know. There were a couple of times where I was scared to be outside or even by myself, and I would have went right into rehab if someone gave me the opportunity where people would watch me and they keep me safe. Sure. So that would have been great. As far as the random person, it's really about the stigma around this particular drug.
Mm.
Is it's it's so it causes disruption in society. I am not helpful to my community when I am high on meth. But to act like everyone who does it is the worst of the worst, which is kind of the feeling I got when I first let it out of the bag that I was a meth user, um, without even knowing it was bad. I told my friends, I was like, I have meth, you want to do that? And then I was like, my first teenage group kicked me out completely and like ghosted me. And I was like, wow. And that's the feeling that came along with that drug for anybody that didn't use it. I got that kind of vibe for the most part throughout my life. So I was forced more into this, like, I will just hang out with people who do drugs. So like treating everyone like humans, but I know that's a lot to ask. Knowing a little bit about their meth before they speak on the quality or character of the individuals who use it. Maybe just don't do that. And also, like, I know a lot of people in active addiction to meth, to cocaine, to alcohol, to fentanyl, all of the drugs for the most part. And when someone is stuck on a drug, it is the same. It is the one they chose. I chose meth. They chose that. And that is the same. And if anybody could stop and take a beat and look into themselves and look at the behaviors that they are doing that they don't want to do, but they can't help it, because we all have them, and relate it to that, because that's just the same cycle I'm stuck in. It's just that I landed on crystal meth because, that's what happened. I found it. I think it might open up a little space in their heart for it. And like, I think that once someone humanized meth users as a community, because we are a community, the meth users, former and past and present, like we're a community and we look out for each other. We just need to like expand because we shouldn't be the only people. Like it doesn't work if people are othering us. It makes us stay in addiction.
So I think that is a great note to end on. We do have a few more questions we didn't get to, but I will send them to the two of you so that we can add them to an FAQ at the end. Really appreciate everyone's questions. And I just want to thank you both so much I really loved getting to know you both, and I appreciate your vulnerability and openness to talk about these things. So, then any sort of one final short statement?
I want to say thank you for doing this. Can't see the list of people, but from what I'm gathering, it's providers or people trying to have an impact in community. And it's these kinds of conversations that I think a lot of providers need to see, like, and participate in. So this is awesome. I love relating my personal experience so folks can understand, just like everything has an answer. This is great. I'm really grateful for you guys for doing this, and I hope that more stuff like this happens.
Because she loves you guys.
I love that as the ending. So, and definitely check out the chat if you have a second. There's so much support and some pretty interesting stories that people have shared in there as well. So we went a few minutes over, but I just loved hearing you both talk so much. Really appreciate you both. All right, end of that session. I'm going to make this short so we stay on time for our break. Our next resource spotlight is just to give you an overview of what we've been doing this whole year, which is this summit is part of our Focus on Meth series. This year we've been doing a series of webinars focused on methamphetamine, overdose and emergency department visits, harm reduction, which Christina Muller-Shin, who will be a panelist shortly, was on, drug checking in Washington State, infectious disease, which really focused on syphilis, and then that meth use among MSM webinar that Jeremy really nicely queued up for us. Mike Berry presents on that, as well as Peter Cleary, who will be in an upcoming session. And then our Washington SOAR TA team, State Opioid Response Technical Assistance Team, did a Stimulant Health Matters series. All of these videos are available online for both of these. Mental health, wound care and skin health, and then an upcoming webinar on heart health and monitoring. So those are all available, and this is also where you can find links to all of the resources that we've shared so far. So looking at our agenda, I think we are queued up for a 10-minute break. So I really appreciate everyone, and I will see you at 11:05.